10:42 in the morning, the Yellow Sea. The American RC-135 Rivet Joint was banking slowly over the cold and gray water. It was supposed to be a standard signals intelligence flight along the edge of sovereign territory, but every digital heartbeat on the flight deck had just stopped. The question for the crew was no longer where they were going. It was where they were right now. The sky above the Yellow Sea was a flat and featureless white. Below the clouds, the water was a deep and churning slate. The aircraft moved through the thin air at 32,000 feet. It was a massive machine filled with sensitive electronics. Usually, those electronics provided a perfect picture of the world. Now, they provided nothing. Inside the cockpit, the mission commander stared at his primary flight display. The screen was not dark. It was worse. The numbers were spinning in a frantic and meaningless circle. The global positioning system coordinates were flickering between 0 and 90 degrees. The backup inertial navigation system showed a bearing that was physically impossible. The pilot spoke to his co-pilot. "Check the backup. Check everything." The co-pilot shook his head. "The backup is cycling. It is not locking." "What about the stars? Can we get a visual? We are between cloud layers. There is no horizon." They were flying blind at 600 miles per hour. In this part of the world, a single mile was the difference between a routine day and an international crisis. The Rivet Joint was a heavy and slow aircraft. It was not built for evasion. It was built for listening. And right now, it was listening to a terrifying silence from its own sensors. 10:45 in the morning, 60 miles away, on the Chinese mainland. Inside the Eastern Theater Command, a different set of screens told a much clearer story. A bright green icon was drifting steadily across a red line on the digital map. The intruder was not squawking a transponder code. It was not responding to automated queries. To the controllers on the ground, it looked like a deliberate penetration of restricted airspace. A senior officer stood behind the radar consoles. His voice was calm but cold. "The American aircraft has crossed the line. It is 3 miles inside the restricted zone." The radar operator typed a command. "It is not turning. It is heading deeper into the sector." The officer reached for the secure phone. "Launch the ready pair from the coastal base. Intercept and identify." 10:48 in the morning. The Rivet Joint cockpit. The mission commander felt a cold sweat beneath his headset. The aircraft felt stable. The engines were humming. But the map on his console was a digital ghost. He knew the winds in this corridor were strong. If they had drifted just 5 degrees off course during the blackout, they were in danger. If they had drifted 10 degrees, they were already in a trap. He keyed the internal intercom. "To all stations, this is the pilot. We have a total navigation failure. Be ready for anything." A voice from the back of the plane responded. "Pilot, this is the electronic warfare officer. I have multiple high-power radar sweeps. They are coming from the west." The pilot tightened his grip on the controls. "Is it ground-based?" "Negative. Those are airborne fire control radars. They are searching for a lock." The American crew did not know their exact location, but someone else did, and that someone was coming to meet them with weapons ready. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 10:49 in the morning, above the Yellow Sea. The cockpit of the RC-135 Rivet Joint was filled with the sound of cooling fans and the steady hum of 4 jet engines. Major Miller gripped the control yoke. He felt the weight of the aircraft. It was a physical sensation that did not match what his instruments were telling him. The flight director was still dead. The primary global positioning system was a sea of red warning flags. Major Miller looked at his co-pilot. "We are flying on dead reckoning. How long has it been?" The co-pilot looked at a manual stopwatch. 7 minutes. 7 minutes since the total navigation failure. Miller did not like the math. At their current airspeed, 7 minutes meant they were nearly 70 miles from where they started the clock. If the wind had pushed them west, they were no longer in international territory. The electronic warfare officer spoke from the back of the aircraft. "Pilot, this is lead tech. The radar sweeps from the west are changing. They have transitioned from search mode to track. We are being painted by a high-resolution fire control system." Miller felt his stomach tighten. "Can you identify the source?" The technician responded immediately. The signature matches the Type 1 47G radar. That belongs to a J-20 stealth fighter. We have 2 of them. Distance is 30 miles and closing fast. 30 miles was a heartbeat in modern aerial warfare. The Rivet Joint was a converted Boeing 707. It was big. It was loud. It was a massive target. 20 miles to the west, Captain Chen of the People's Liberation Army Air Force adjusted his oxygen mask. His cockpit was a silent world of green digital light. He was flying the J-20. It was the most advanced fighter in the Chinese inventory. To his left, his wingman maintained a perfect formation. Chen looked at the large tactical display in the center of his console. The American Intruder was a large yellow icon. It was flying at 32,000 feet. It had not changed its heading. It had not accelerated. To Chen, this did not look like a spy mission. It looked like a provocation. Captain Chen spoke into his radio. "Command, this is Dragon 1. I have the target on radar. Requesting permission to close for visual identification." The controller on the ground responded, "Dragon 1, you are cleared to close. The target is inside the exclusion zone. You are authorized to use non-lethal deterrence if they do not turn immediately." "Copy. Closing now." Chen pushed his throttles forward. The J-20 surged. He was not using his afterburners. He did not need them. He was already flying at Mach 0.9. He watched the distance close on his display. 20 miles, 15 miles, 10 miles. Inside the American aircraft, the alarms were no longer steady. They were rhythmic. A rhythmic alarm meant the incoming radar was getting more energy back from the Rivet Joint. It meant the Chinese pilots were focusing their sensors. The electronic warfare officer called out again. "Pilot, they are at 12 miles. Bearing 270. Level altitude. They are coming straight for our nose." Miller looked out the left side of the cockpit window. He saw nothing but the white haze of the clouds. Then, a dark shape broke through the mist. It was sleek. It was angular. It was painted in a low-visibility gray that made it look like a ghost against the sky. The J-20 slid into view only 500 meters away. It was so close that Miller could see the individual panels on its fuselage. The Chinese pilot did not wave. He did not signal. He maintained a steady, menacing position just off the American wing. Then, the second J-20 appeared, on the other side. The Rivet Joint was now boxed in. The co-pilot looked at the fighters. "They are not just intercepting us, they are hurting us." Miller keyed his radio. "This is American aircraft on guard frequency. To the aircraft off my wing. We have experienced a navigation failure. We are attempting to identify our position." There was only static. Then, a voice came through. It was clear and professional. "American aircraft, you are in restricted airspace. You will follow my lead or you will be forced down." 10:52 in the morning. The Eastern Theater Command and the Yellow Sea. Inside the Chinese command center, the atmosphere was heavy with technical precision. Rows of operators sat before glowing blue consoles. On the main wall, a massive digital map showed the American RC-135 as a pulsing red triangle. It was now deep enough into the restricted zone to trigger an automatic alert at the highest levels of the military hierarchy. A senior colonel stood with his hands behind his back. He watched the data feed from the J-20 interceptors. The fighters were holding a tight formation around the larger American plane. To the colonel, the American aircraft looked like it was loitering. It was not retreating. It was not advancing. It was simply existing in a space it was not allowed to be. The colonel spoke to his communications officer. "Have they acknowledged our warning?" The officer looked up from his headset. "They claim a navigation failure, sir. They are requesting a vector to international water." The colonel narrowed his eyes. A navigation failure on a Rivet Joint is highly unlikely. That aircraft is a flying laboratory. It has 4 independent systems for positioning. The probability of all 4 failing simultaneously is near 0. "Sir, should we guide them out?" "No. Tell Dragon 1 to maintain the box. If they attempt to climb or dive, it is a hostile act." We will escort them to the coastal airfield for inspection. 7 miles away, inside the American aircraft, the situation was reaching a breaking point. The cabin was filled with the smell of recycled air and the heat from hundreds of server racks. The mission crew in the back were no longer collecting intelligence. They were fighting to save the aircraft. The lead technician was kneeling on the floor. He had pulled a maintenance panel from the base of the main navigation rack. Bundles of fiber optic cables glowed with a faint internal light. He was looking for signs of hardware failure. He found none. Everything looked perfect. Yet the data coming out of the processors was pure noise. The technician spoke into his headset. "Pilot, this is lead tech. I have performed a hard reset on the primary inertial unit. It is still giving us a location in the middle of the Gobi Desert. That is 3,000 miles away," Major Miller responded from the cockpit. "We do not have time for a tech support call. The J-20s are closing the gap. They are less than 50 meters from our wingtips now. Sir, I think we are being spoofed. But it is not a normal signal. It is completely saturating our receivers. It is like a wall of white noise that our systems think is a real signal." Major Miller looked out his window again. The J-20 on his left was so close he could see the flight suit of the Chinese pilot. The Chinese pilot turned his head. He looked directly at Miller. Then, he slowly raised a hand and pointed downward. It was a clear command. "Land now." The co-pilot checked the fuel gauges. "We have 3 hours of loiter time left, but if we follow them to the coast, we are giving them the plane. We cannot let this technology fall into their hands." Miller gripped the yoke tighter. "We are not landing, but we cannot outrun them. We need to find a way to tell them we are not a threat before someone gets nervous." The co-pilot looked at the radar altimeter. It was the only instrument still working because it used a simple bounce-back signal. "Sir, we are at 32,000 feet. If we drop to 10,000, we might get under the interference. It is worth a try. If we drop altitude now, they will think we are diving to attack. It is too risky." A new sound filled the cockpit. It was a low, steady growl. It was the sound of a missile lock warning. One of the J-20s had transitioned from a visual escort to a combat posture. The morning was becoming a countdown. Every second brought them closer to a decision that could not be undone. 10:49 in the morning. Above the western edge of the Yellow Sea, the white haze of the clouds began to thin. For the first time in 20 minutes, the American crew could see the world below. It was not what they expected. Instead of the open, empty water of the international corridor, Major Miller saw a jagged coastline. He saw the gray smudge of a coastal city and the white wakes of hundreds of fishing boats. He was not over the open sea. He was looking at mainland China. Major Miller felt a surge of adrenaline. "Co-pilot, look left. Tell me that is not the Shandong Peninsula." The co-pilot pressed his face to the glass. His voice was a whisper. "That is the mainland. We are not just over the line. We are deep inside their front door." The navigation failure was no longer a technical problem. It was a diplomatic catastrophe. The Rivet Joint was carrying some of the most sensitive listening equipment in the American inventory. To the Chinese military, it looked like a brazen spy flight over their sovereign soil. On the wing of the American aircraft, Captain Chen watched the intruder. He saw the American pilot looking out the window. He saw the moment of realization. Chen felt no satisfaction. He felt only the heavy responsibility of his orders. Captain Chen keyed his radio again. His voice was hard. "American aircraft, you are now over Chinese territory. You are in violation of international law. This is your final warning. Turn to heading 270 and descend to 10,000 feet immediately. If you do not comply, we will be forced to use intercept measures." Major Miller knew the protocol. He also knew the risks. If he followed the Chinese fighters to a landing, the aircraft and its crew would be detained. The technology would be stripped. But if he stayed on his current course, he was a target. "Control. This is the pilot. We have visual on the mainland. We are turning now. Miller pulled the heavy control yoke to the right. The massive RC-135 began a slow, lumbering turn. It was like trying to turn a skyscraper in a hurricane. The aircraft leaned into the bank. The J-20 on the left did not move. It stayed locked to the wing. But the J-20 on the right, piloted by Captain Chen's wingman, suddenly accelerated. It pulled ahead of the American plane. Then, it banked sharply across the nose of the Rivet Joint. The American plane bucked as it hit the jet wash from the fighter's engines. The cockpit shook. Alarms for engine stall flickered on the dashboard. "He just thundered us," the co-pilot yelled. "He is trying to knock us out of the sky." Major Miller fought the controls. "Steady. He is just trying to rattle us. Keep the turn. Get us back to the water." In the back of the plane, the electronic warfare officer was screaming into his headset. "Pilot, we have a second radar lock. This one is from a surface-to-air missile battery on the coast. They are tracking us. They are not just watching. They have a firing solution." 10:57 in the morning. The American aircraft was halfway through its turn. It was headed back toward international water. But the Chinese military was not waiting. They saw the American aircraft maneuvering. To a radar operator on the ground, a sharp turn can look like a tactical repositioning. It can look like a preparation for an attack. Captain Chen saw the lock warning on his own display. The ground battery was ready to fire. "Command! This is Dragon 1!" Chen shouted. "Do not engage. The target is turning." I repeat, the target is complying. There was no answer from the ground. Only the steady, high-pitched whine of a missile system reaching its final launch sequence. Inside the Rivet Joint, the master caution light turned a bright, lethal red. "Missile launch!" the technician yelled. "Something just left the ground." 10:58 in the morning. The coast of the Shandong Peninsula. A single trail of white smoke climbed rapidly from a hidden battery near the shoreline. It was an HQ-9 surface-to-air missile. It was a long-range, high-speed interceptor designed to destroy targets at high altitude. The missile was moving at Mach 4. It was guided by a ground-based phased array radar that had been locked onto the American aircraft for the last 90 seconds. Inside the RC-135 Rivet Joint, the audio environment changed from professional chatter to a high-pitched, continuous scream. This was the launch warning. The aircraft was no longer being watched. It was being hunted. Major Miller shouted over the alarm. "Deploy countermeasures. All stations, brace for impact." In the back of the plane, the electronic warfare officer punched a sequence into his console. Outside, small metal canisters ejected from the fuselage. They exploded into a cloud of millions of tiny aluminum strips known as chaff. At the same time, high-power transmitters on the wings began pumping out thousands of watts of white noise. They were trying to create a digital ghost in the sky to confuse the incoming missile. The heavy aircraft banked as hard as the airframe would allow. The wings groaned under the stress of 4 Gs of force. Metal groaned. The floor tilted at a steep angle. 11 o'clock in the morning. The Chinese Eastern Theater Command, the senior colonel stared at the screen in disbelief. The missile launch had not been authorized by his station. It had been a local decision by a battery commander, who saw the American aircraft turning toward a sensitive naval installation. The colonel grabbed the radio handset. "Battery 3. Abort. Terminate the guidance signal. Now." The operator at the battery responded with a shaking voice. "Sir, the missile is in active terminal homing. We have lost uplink control. It is looking for the target on its own." The colonel looked back at the tactical map. The red icon of the missile was merging with the yellow icon of the American plane. Only 2 miles away, Captain Chen watched the white streak of the missile through his canopy. It was a terrifying sight. He knew that if the American plane was destroyed, the day would end in a war that no one wanted. He made a split-second decision. Captain Chen spoke to his wingman. "Dragon 2, follow me. We are going to intercept the interceptor." Chen pushed his throttles into full afterburner. The twin engines of the J-20 roared. 2 long tongues of blue flame shot from the back of the stealth fighter. He accelerated past Mach 1.2, creating a sonic boom that echoed across the water. He was not aiming for the American plane. He was aiming for the path of the missile. 11:01 in the morning, the American crew felt a massive jolt. It was the shockwave from the J-20 passing within 30 meters of their nose. "What was that?" the co-pilot yelled. "The Chinese fighter just crossed our path," Miller said. His hands were white on the controls. "He is trying to draw the missile away." Captain Chen watched his sensors. The HQ-9 missile was a heat seeker in its final phase. It was looking for the largest infrared signature in the sky. The 4 massive engines of the Rivet Joint were a huge target. Chen moved his fighter directly in front of the American plane. He then ejected a string of magnesium flares. The flares burned at 2,000 degrees. They were brighter than any engine. For a fraction of a second, the missile's computer was forced to choose. It hesitated. It veered toward the flares. The missile passed between the J-20 and the Rivet Joint. It missed the American wing by less than 15 meters. The explosion was a blinding flash of orange and black. The concussion wave hit both aircraft like a physical hammer. The Rivet Joint rolled violently to the left. The J-20 was tossed upward like a leaf. Major Miller fought to level the wings. "Status: Did we take a hit?" the technician responded. "No shrapnel, but we have a compressor stall on engine number 3. We are losing power." The American aircraft was still in the air, but it was crippled, and they were still inside Chinese territory. 11:02 in the morning. Inside the Rivet Joint, the cabin shook with a violent, rhythmic vibration. Engine number 3 was a dead weight on the right wing. The compressor stall had sent a shudder through the entire airframe. Firelights flickered on the overhead panel. The aircraft was losing altitude. It was sliding down through 30,000 feet. Major Miller fought the yoke. It felt like wrestling a living thing. "Extinguish number 3. Close the fuel line. Now." The co-pilot moved with mechanical speed. Fuel shut off. Extinguisher discharged. The vibration is slowing. We are stabilized, but we are heavy. Keep us turning. We need the water. 11:02 and 30 seconds in the morning. Inside the second J-20, the wingman, Dragon 2, had watched the explosion from a distance. He saw his leader, Captain Chen, tossed by the blast. He saw the American plane roll. To Dragon 2, it looked like a combat engagement that had already begun. He did not know the missile was a rogue launch from the ground. He only saw his commander in danger. Dragon 2 keyed his combat override. Dragon 1. Status: I am engaging the intruder. There was only static from Captain Chen's radio. The blast had temporarily knocked out his short-range antennas. Dragon 2 did not wait. He leveled his wings. He pushed a button on his side stick controller. Beneath the sleek, dark belly of the J-20, the internal weapons bay doors began to cycle. They slid open with a mechanical hiss. Inside the bay, a PL-15 long-range air-to-air missile moved into the launch position. It was a white, lethal cylinder. Its seeker head was already cooling. It was looking for a lock. 11:03 in the morning. The American electronic warfare fair officer screamed into the intercom. "New lock! New lock! This is not a ground station. This is an airborne active seeker. He is inside the box. He is looking at our tailpipes." Major Miller looked at his mirrors. He could not see the second fighter. It was in his blind spot. "Check the flares. Do we have anything left?" "We are empty on flares. Chaff is at 10%. If he fires, we are a target." The sound in the American cockpit changed. The warning chime became a continuous, high-pitched tone. It was the sound of a terminal lock. The missile was ready to leave the rail. In the Chinese command center, the senior colonel saw the weapons bay status on his telemetry. Dragon 2. Break off. Do not fire. That is an order. The wingman did not respond. He was in a high G turn, focused entirely on the kill. He was 5 seconds from pulling the trigger. Inside the Rivet Joint, Miller felt the end coming. He could not turn fast enough. He could not run. He was a slow-moving target in a sky full of wolves. He looked at his co-pilot. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. 11:03 and 15 seconds in the morning, above the Yellow Sea. The finger of the Chinese wingman, Dragon 2, was tightening on the launch trigger. In his helmet, the tone was a solid, unrelenting wall of sound. He had a perfect infrared track on the American aircraft. The internal computer was calculating the final intercept path. The missile was ready to fly. Then, the world changed. A sudden, deafening burst of audio static tore through every radio frequency simultaneously. It was not a military jammer. It was a massive, high-power, automated broadcast on the International Maritime Distress Frequency. The signal was so strong it bypassed the digital filters of both the J-20 and the Rivet Joint. A synthesized voice, cold and rhythmic, began to repeat a series of coordinates. Mayday! Mayday! This is the motor vessel Silver Orion. We are experiencing total system failure. All navigation is lost. We are broadcasting a high-power emergency beacon. All vessels stay clear. 11:03 and 45 seconds in the morning. Inside the American cockpit, the flickering displays did not just stabilize, they snapped into place with violent precision. The spinning numbers on the primary flight display stopped. The GPS coordinates locked. The map zoomed out, recalibrating itself in a heartbeat. Major Miller stared at the screen. Pilot to all stations. Systems are back. The navigation lock is green. The co-pilot pointed at the radar altimeter. Look at the signal strength. That maritime beacon just punched a hole through the interference. It acted like a master clock for our processors. Where are we? Miller asked. The co-pilot checked the map. We are 2 miles inside the line, but we are already halfway through the turn. We will be back in international air in 60 seconds. Inside the lead J-20, Captain Chen saw the same phenomenon. His electronic warfare display, which had been showing a clean environment, suddenly lit up with a massive purple bloom. The purple bloom represented a wide-spectrum interference source located on the water, 5 miles to the south. Chen looked down at his tactical map. He saw the American plane was not loitering. It was not attacking. It was executing a standard, heavy aircraft recovery turn. More importantly, he saw the source of the chaos. A large cargo ship was dead in the water below them. The ship was surrounded by a cloud of black smoke. It was not just broadcasting a distress signal, it was emitting a massive, unintentional electronic pulse from a malfunctioning high-power satellite uplink. Captain Chen keyed his radio. He used the wide-area broadcast channel so his wingman would hear him. Dragon 2, cease fire, cease fire. The intruder is experiencing technical interference from the surface. They are not hostile. I repeat, do not engage. 11:04 in the morning. The wingman, Dragon 2, froze. His finger remained on the trigger, but he did not pull. He looked at his own display. The target icon for the American plane had changed from a steady red to a blinking yellow. The fire control computer was struggling to stay locked because the maritime beacon was now drowning out everything. Dragon 2 acknowledges, the wingman said. His voice was thick with the sudden release of tension. Breaking lock, closing weapons bay. The mechanical doors on the belly of the J-20 slid shut. The PL-15 missile remained on its rail. The lethal chime in the American cockpit stopped. It was replaced by the low, steady hum of the remaining 3 engines. In the Chinese Eastern Theater Command, the senior colonel sat back in his chair. He watched the 2 icons on the map. The American plane was crossing the blue line, moving back into the international corridor. The J-20s were no longer in an attack formation. They were now flying parallel to the intruder, maintaining a respectful but firm distance. The colonel looked at his technical officer. The cargo ship. Identify it. The officer typed quickly. It is a Panamanian-flagged vessel, sir. Carrying industrial electronics. It appears a fire in their cargo hold has caused a massive short circuit in a shipment of experimental high-power transmitters. They are effectively a giant, floating jammer. The colonel nodded slowly. The Americans were not spying. They were lost in the fog. 11:05 in the morning. The American Rivet Joint crossed the imaginary line in the sky. It was back in international territory. Major Miller felt the weight of the last 10 minutes settle into his bones. His hands were shaking. He looked out the window one last time. The two Chinese fighters were still there. They were no longer ghosts in the mist. They were clear, lethal shapes against the white clouds. Captain Chen dipped his wing. It was a brief, professional acknowledgement. Then, both J-20s pulled into a steep, vertical climb. They disappeared into the upper atmosphere in seconds. The sky was empty again, but it was not the same sky it had been at 10:42. 11:05 in the morning. International airspace over the Yellow Sea. The RC-135 Rivet Joint crossed the maritime boundary at 28,000 feet. It was flying on 3 engines. The vibration from the failed number 3 engine had settled into a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. Major Miller kept his eyes locked on the horizon. The sky was still a hazy white. The Chinese interceptors had vanished. Into the cloud deck above them, Major Miller spoke into the internal intercom. To all stations, we are back in the corridor. Status report. The co-pilot checked the fuel flow. Engine number 3 is fully feathered. We have sufficient fuel to reach Okinawa. Hydraulics are holding. Electrical load is high but stable. The electronic warfare officer added his report. The interference is fading. The maritime beacon from the Silver Orion is still strong, but the saturation on our GPS has dropped by 60%. We have a solid navigation fix. Major Miller took a deep breath. His flight suit was damp with sweat. Contact Kadena Air Base. Tell them we had a total system failure and a near miss. We are declaring an emergency and heading home. 11:08 in the morning. The Eastern Theater Command. The senior colonel stood in front of the main display. The red triangle of the American aircraft was now safely on the other side of the line. The tension in the room had shifted, from the heat of battle to the cold reality of a formal investigation. He looked at the radar operator. The colonel spoke with a heavy voice. I want a full download of the telemetry from Battery 3. I want to know exactly why that HQ-9 missile was launched without a command from this station. The operator nodded. Yes, sir. The battery commander is already under detention. He claims the interference from the cargo ship looked like a jamming attack from the American plane. He thought he was acting in self-defense. The colonel looked at the screen. He almost started a war because he could not distinguish a malfunctioning radio from a weapon. Send the data to the Central Command. We need to explain this to the Americans before they retaliate. 11:12 in the morning. Inside the lead J-20, Captain Chen leveled his aircraft at 45,000 feet. The air was thin and crystal clear. He looked at his fuel gauge. The high-speed dash and the use of afterburners had depleted his reserves. He was now on a direct path, back to his home base on Hainan Island. Captain Chen keyed his radio to his wingman. Dragon 2. Maintain formation. Check your weapon status. The wingman responded. Dragon 2, weapons bay is secure. PL-15 is safed. My apologies, leader. I thought the engagement had begun. Chen watched the clouds below. The fog of war is not just a phrase. Today, it was a physical thing. We were all blind. Do not let it happen again. 11:15 in the morning. The American cockpit. The co-pilot was monitoring the long-range radio. Pilot, we have Kadena on the line. They are sending a pair of 15s to escort us in. They want a full debrief. The moment we touch the tarmac. Major Miller nodded. He looked at the empty seat of the navigator. In the modern age, they had grown to trust the machines completely. They believed the blue dot on the screen was the truth. Today, the blue dot had lied. For 7 minutes, they had lived in a world where the map was not the territory. Miller spoke to his co-pilot. 7 minutes. That was all it took. We were 7 minutes away from a different kind of history. The co-pilot looked at the stopwatch, and a cargo ship with a broken radio saved us. It was not the ship, Miller said. It was the pilot on the other side. He saw what the computers could not. He saw that we were just as lost as he was. The Rivet Joint turned toward the east. Toward the east, the sun was beginning to break through the haze. The aircraft was wounded. The crew was exhausted. They were safe for now. But the electronic anomaly that had caused the crisis was still out there, and it was not an accident. The investigation was just beginning. 11:10 in the morning, over the central Yellow Sea. The RC-135 was now 10 miles clear of the Chinese maritime border. But the danger was not over. The aircraft was heavy with fuel and filled with tons of sensitive internal hardware. On 3 engines, it was struggling to maintain its airspeed against a strong headwind. Major Miller looked at the temperature gauges for the remaining 3 engines. They were running hot. The co-pilot adjusted the trim. "We are losing another 500 feet every minute. If we do not stabilize, we will be in the water before the 15s reach us." A new voice crackled over the emergency radio. It was not the American controllers in Okinawa. It was the Chinese-led pilot, Captain Chen. He had not returned to Hainan Island. He had looped back, staying at a distance until he was sure the situation was stable. "American aircraft. This is Dragon 1. We are observing your descent. Do you require assistance with navigation vectors to avoid the interference zone?" Major Miller hesitated. Accepting help from the pilot who almost shot him down was a strange choice. But he looked at his flickering displays. The Silver Orion was still broadcasting its chaotic signal. The electronic fog was shifting with the wind. "Dragon 1, this is the pilot. We have a partial power loss. We are struggling with the climb. Any data on the clear corridor would be appreciated." Captain Chen's voice was steady. "Copy. Turn to heading 095. There is a gap in the interference 5 miles ahead. I will fly 10 miles to your south to mark the boundary of the restricted zone. Do not cross my line." For the next 10 minutes, the 2 adversaries flew a strange, silent formation. The J-20 was a dark speck on the southern horizon. It acted as a living lighthouse. It marked the edge of the safe air. Inside the Rivet Joint, the crew watched the Chinese fighter. They no longer saw a predator. They saw a professional doing a job. 11:15 in the morning. The Pentagon, Washington District of Columbia. 10,000 miles away, the sun was not yet up. Inside the National Military Command Center, the atmosphere was electric. Senior generals stood around a glass table. They were watching a live satellite feed of the Yellow Sea. A brigadier general pointed at the 2 icons. "The Chinese are not engaging. They are escorting. Our Rivet Joint is limping, and the J-20s are staying on their flank without locking their radars." "Why?" a 4-star admiral asked. "We think they realize what happened. Our signals teams have identified the Silver Orion. It is not just a cargo ship. It was carrying a prototype telecommunications array destined for a port in the south. The fire on board turned that array into an unintentional electronic warfare platform." The admiral nodded. The 7-minute gap. "It was a technical accident that almost triggered a global war. Tell the State Department to open the direct line to Beijing. We need to formalize this de-escalation before a third party tries to exploit the confusion." 11:18 in the morning. The Rivet Joint. The aircraft finally reached the clear air. The navigation systems locked with 100% accuracy. The engine temperatures began to drop. As they leveled off at 24,000 feet, Major Miller keyed the radio. "Dragon 1. We have a clear fix. We can take it from here. Thank you for the vector." There was a long pause. When Captain Chen spoke, his voice was quieter. "Understood. The sky is clear now. Fly safe. Dragon 1 is departing." The J-20 banked sharply. It did not climb this time. It flew low and fast, heading back toward the Chinese coast. Major Miller watched it go. He knew that in a few hours, the politicians would be arguing about violations and sovereignty. But in this moment, there was only the shared relief of 2 crews, who had looked into the abyss and stepped back. The crisis was resolving, but the mystery of the Silver Orion was only beginning to deepen. 11:20 in the morning. The East China Sea. 2 dark slivers appeared on the eastern horizon. They were moving much faster than the crippled RC-135. These were not Challengers. They were American 15 Eagle fighters launched from Kadena Air Base. They arrived with a thunderous roar, banking into position on either side of the Rivet Joint. For the first time in nearly an hour, Major Miller felt the crushing weight of the mission begin to lift. The lead 15 pilot spoke over the encrypted tactical net. Guardian 161. This is Eagle 1. We have you in sight. We are your escort to the fence. Status of your emergency. Major Miller adjusted his headset. His voice was raspy. Eagle 1. We are on 3 engines. Navigation is restored but degraded. We have multiple internal system failures due to high-power electronic interference. Be advised. The area to our west is an active electronic hazard zone. Copy. Guardian. We have the data. We will tuck in tight. Let us get you home. The 3 aircraft formed a protective triangle. The nimble fighters adjusted their speed to match the slow, labored pace of the heavy reconnaissance plane. Below them, the water turned from the gray of the Yellow Sea to the deep, sparkling blue of the open Pacific. The line of the horizon was finally sharp and clear. 11:25 in the morning. Hainan Island, China. The wheels of the 2 J-20 fighters touched the runway with a synchronized puff of white smoke. Captain Chen deployed his drag chute. He felt the massive deceleration pull him against his harness. He steered his aircraft toward a hardened concrete hangar, where a team of technicians and high-ranking officers were already waiting. As the engines whined down to a halt, the silence in the cockpit felt heavy. Chen sat still for a moment, staring at the blank tactical display. He knew that within the hour, he would be in a windowless room. He would be asked to justify every second of the flight. He would be asked why he did not fire when the intruder crossed the line. He reached up and slowly removed his flight helmet. His wingman, Dragon 2, climbed down from his own cockpit. The younger pilot looked shaken. He walked over to Chen's aircraft. Dragon 2 spoke as the ground crew swarmed around them. Leader. The data from the ground battery. They are saying it was an automated response to the jamming. Captain Chen looked at his wingman. The machines did exactly what they were programmed to do. That was the problem. If we had followed the programming, neither of us would be standing here. 11:30 in the morning. The Rivet Joint. In the back of the American aircraft, the electronic warfare officer was supervised as his team began the sanitization protocol. They were not erasing intelligence. They were isolating the corrupted data from the 7-minute gap. They needed to preserve the exact signature of the interference that had blinded them. The technician looked at his lead. It was a perfect storm. The satellite uplink on that ship hit a resonance frequency with our shielded cables. It created a feedback loop that the processors couldn't filter. It wasn't a weapon. It was a technical shadow. The lead tech nodded. A shadow that almost looked like a ghost fleet. We need to make sure the next crew knows the difference. Major Miller looked at the fuel gauges one last time. They had enough to make the approach. The island of Okinawa was now a green smudge on the nose camera. The crisis had passed. There were no cheers in the cockpit. There was only the sound of checklists being read and the steady, professional rhythm of a crew preparing to land a damaged multi-million-dollar aircraft. They had survived the encounter. But the world they were returning to was different now. The 7-minute gap had proven that the most advanced technology in the world was only as reliable as the human beings watching the screens. The landing gear cycled down with a heavy thud. The runway was waiting. 6 hours after the emergency landing at Kadena Air Base, Okinawa, Major Miller sat in a windowless room deep beneath the base headquarters. The air was sterile and smelled of ozone. Across the metal table, 3 intelligence officers from the Pacific Command watched him with unblinking eyes. A digital recorder sat between them. Its small red light was the only color in the room. One of the officers spoke. His voice was flat. Walk us through the 7-minute gap again, Major. We have the sensor logs. We see the telemetry. We want to hear what you saw with your own eyes. Miller leaned forward. He felt the phantom vibration of the failed engine. There was no warning. 1 second the navigation was green. The next, the world was a ghost. The map showed us 3,000 miles away. The compass was spinning. We were flying a 40-ton aircraft into a wall of white noise. And the Chinese intercept, the officer prompted. They claim you were 3 miles inside the line. We were, Miller said, but we did not know it until the clouds broke. By then, we were boxed. The J-20 pilots were professional. They were aggressive, but they were following a script. until the missile launch. The room went silent for a moment. The officers looked at each other. They had already seen the video from the nose camera. They had seen the white streak of the HQ-9 missile and the desperate flare of the Chinese fighter that intercepted it. Miller continued, "The Chinese-led pilot saved us. He knew his own ground battery had made a mistake. He put his aircraft between us. He put his aircraft between us and the missile. He chose to protect a foreign intruder over his own safety. That is not in the training manual." 8 hours after the intercept. Hainan Island. Captain Chen stood at a rigid attention in a small office. The senior colonel sat behind a heavy desk. A thick file of radar printouts lay open between them. He was looking at Chen. "The battery commander at the coast has been relieved of duty," the colonel said. "He fired without a confirmed identity. He saw the interference. He saw the interference from the cargo ship and assumed it was an American attack. He was a fool." Chen kept his gaze fixed on the wall. The machines gave him the wrong answer. "Sir?" He trusted the radar more than the context of the situation. The colonel stood up and walked to the window. "And you moved your aircraft into the path of a friendly missile. You risked a state asset to protect an American spy plane. Why? Because a war started by an accident is a war that cannot be won. The Americans were lost. If we had killed them, the world would not have cared about the technical failure of a cargo ship. They would have only seen the fire." The colonel turned around. There was a long pause. "The High Command has reviewed your flight data. They have decided to record this as a successful defense of sovereign airspace. You are grounded for 2 weeks during the formal review. After that, you will return to your squadron." 3 days later. The Pentagon, Washington, District of Columbia. A joint technical report was finalized. And transmitted to the Executive Government Office. It was classified at the highest level. The report detailed the gap. It explained how a shipment of experimental high-power routers on the motor vessel Silver Orion had short-circuited during a fire. The resulting pulse had created a localized GPS dead zone that mimicked a sophisticated electronic warfare attack. The report concluded with a single sentence: "The margin of error between a routine patrol and a nuclear exchange was exactly 7 minutes of human decision-making." In Beijing and Washington, the hotlines remained active. For the first time in a decade, both nations agreed to share emergency navigation frequencies. They called it the Orion Protocol. It was a silent admission that their technology had become too complex for their own safety. Major Miller returned to flight status a week later. He flew the same track over the Yellow Sea. The sky was blue. The water was calm. But every time he looked at his navigation screen, he remembered the spinning numbers. He knew the peace was fragile. It was held together by the thin thread of professional restraint and the memory of a pilot on the other side who chose to wait. The strategic assessment was clear. The next crisis would not be caused by a general. It would be caused by a ghost in the machine.